G'day and welcome. It's been recommended to me from a couple of friends maybe I should do some summary videos of some of the cars and bikes I've restored. If there's any sort of further detail or explanation you need, there's a full playlist on this. We're starting with the XW Falcon, which is one of the more popular ones I've done. This car, of course, was I think, completed in 2015, so I hope you enjoy. And here she is in all her glory. Very honest old car, a bit shabby, home paint job, crazed paint everywhere, so everything had to come off it. A 6-cylinder car, you'll hear it running in a moment. It ran beautifully, but the car was knackered pretty much. It was very, very tired, and had a whole host of gremlins in it. The interior was pretty well rubbish. The car was just flogged out. It was pretty well knackered. There was rust on the right-hand C-pillar from a pinhole in some filler in the drip rail, and it all got under. You can see it coming up now. But here's a bit of sound of the engine running as it was when we got it. So it really was a sweet little runner. We're looking at a 351 Cleveland here at a Ford LTD, a virgin bore engine. I was going to use that but ended up keeping it for the XC. Of course, the other one I had was a FE big block, and that was a lovely engine, a 390 that I'd sort of done up and I sold because I needed some money, which was one of those other things I really regretted doing. It was a lovely thing indeed. Of course, here's the car as we started. Rust all over the turret, just surface rust from not being prepped and painted properly. The car was nice, but it was really down and really did need a good overhaul. So basically we wheeled it into the garage and started ripping it apart. The first thing was the bumper, because it's fun, and followed that up with the bonnet. Really easy to do. Of course, the floors in the front were covered in tar, this tarry stuff and newspaper, and of course that holds all the moisture, and the rust had just got away from whoever had it before and gone through. So that was going to have to all be removed. Radiator and fan, again, nice easy stuff, and of course then we get into pulling the engine out. And the engine was hugely long with that transmission on the back of it, but I did it all in one hit. It was nearly up against the ceiling of the garage, but it had to come out. That's just all there was to it. Whatever the case though, it was a good engine. It was a good runner, and I kind of regret selling that too. I got rid of that quite quickly. Would have been a good one to keep there because it was the matching number engine for the car. So that didn't stick around here for long. Of course, we took the guards off, and looking around the seals for rust and everything, that was really, really good. Although it did have me fooled up here. We're shooting up near the base of the windshield. That body sealer stuff underneath that, it was rusted out, so we had to make patches and everything. Engine block 351 Windsor from my brother's Mustang. He went back to the original 302 block that it had originally. That was a very good engine indeed. So I kept pulling it apart, pulling the doors out, pulled the heater box out, having a look at that. That's one of those fibro sort of composite things. The Galaxy had one of those, and very easy to break, so you've got to be quite careful with them. But the floors, yeah, that was a bit of a downer. We scored a win with the seals, but we didn't with the floor. But the back floor, you can see there, wasn't too bad at all. So we're still stripping the old XW down. Front suspension's still in, both guards are off. I've decided to cut the seal out. There are a couple of minor rust issues in here. In fact, that's gone through there. So that's all going to have to be cleaned off and re-welded. So, pressing on. Alright, so the back window's out now. Not great news. A bit of rust there. Hole around the other side. So that's going to have to be cut out and re-welded. So, of course, any old car's going to have the mandatory mouse nest in it, so what do you do? Ended up pulling the headlining out though because it's a marine crater. I wanted a perforated one. They're much easier to clean, and probably should have kept this as a pattern because I ended up having trouble with that. The lip around the windshield looked really good. No complaints, nothing. I was pretty happy with that, although that rust there did extend up further. I ended up making, I think, about 3 patches to sort that out, so that was a bit of bad news. But look, against the rest of the car, big deal. It was nothing to worry about. How are you? So sort of picking up bits as I saw them on special or whenever they turned up really. That's the fuel tank kit. It was just easier than messing around with the old one that came with an absolutely brilliant fitting kit. I had no issue with that. And John at Old School Spares, in Bayswater, I think he's in Campbellfield now, came up with this bonnet which was a cracker. It was brilliant compared to the old one, so I was really, really happy with that. So just continued pulling bits and pieces out. While this was all going on, I was rebuilding the engine, the 351 Windsor, and I'll stick it in a separate set of videos. Rear differential, I paid $90 for this, I think. It was out of an XY302, so I was really happy with that as a purchase. Going through, just power grinding all that rust out with a stainless steel brush on an angle grinder. It was a horrible job, and I had to mask up, but it had to be done because the thing was just a horrible mess. So I started fabricating patches and fitting them in there and all that sort of stuff. It was worse than I thought it was going to be, this car, but look, at the end of the day, underneath those rear screens, they're always going to rust. There's not much you can do about it. Marking out the floors after I sort of vacuumed it up and put the new one down there, and basically just cut it out. That was the only thing I was going to fix, but there was no other way. There we go. It's floored that was. Rear floors are alright, we can repair those. The front ones are out. Sills look beautiful on this car. You can see down there I've ground out all the top of the sill. It's a sill down there, so I've just had to sort of make a piece there so it can be plug welded, and we can put that in, and obviously you put your sealer on top, and then this one sort of goes in like that, and that's all got to be sort of tacked in and belted into shape and line welded around there, seam welded around there, and then we can put some sealer on top. Sort of pain in the neck. Deburring can be a bit of a pain because you can get a file across here, but you can't sort of get it into some of these irregular shapes. I'm just going to use a countersink. Oh, geez, I'm not going well. You can see how stained the metal is, but it sort of sits on top. It's horrible stuff. Basically, you can see got to get right into it. This seems safer because it's not getting the metal warm. But when you do it, I'll just do a little bit for now. You've got to get rid of all the dark stuff, and you sort of get left with this stained metal. Now, there's fresh metal, there's stained metal. Now, this has to all be treated. Got tiny little pock marks in it. Now, these areas in here, I'm going to do with a wire brush on a drill or an angle grinder. I've got to buy a new one actually, the other one's gone bald. And there's beautiful fresh metal under there. And I haven't had to grind it or rub it around. Check out this, it's sort of sliding down under the weight of itself. But you can't leave this in bare metal too long. In fact, it'll rust before your very eyes. And you can see on the roof, I mean, it's all dusty now. But I've just put a very water thin coat of etch primer on, just as I have on this side. I've already stripped this one here, and that'll protect it so we can sort of touch it. So aside from the front end, the car's pretty much blown apart. We had to revisit the floors at the front. We plug welded them, but they had to be seam welded with overlap according to Vic Roads code, so we redid that. And of course the patches are in the back there, and that was all thanks to Michael Crump. He gave me a hand with it and he did a lovely job. And it's pretty manky. It's got a plate that's been stuck there before, and they did a pretty crappy job, so I'll just roll up a new bit of 1mm sheet. We can put that in. That also gives me access to sort of pour 15. So edged with pour 15 metal ready before we put this down, just to make sure it was going to stay properly. And of course that was the transmission brace, or the seat brace we put in for bucket seats. It was originally XA/XC, but the other ones are too dear. It was a rip-off, so we decided to make our own. Radiator support brace, which I fabricated and we welded in, because the radiator's mounted in a different way on the V8 cars. And of course we got to the rear window, and all that's ready now. It's all been etched, welded up, etched, and a bit of pour 15. Of course there's the floor done as well, so that was all good. That was all finished, and take a breather with it. That's the first skin that was put on. Of course we poured it, let it go off, and then we welded the second ones in, and you can see them. I can't even get it right there, but yeah, that all went in really well, so I was well happy with that. So I fabricated this dolly out of a couple of jockey wheels. Michael again helped me with that, and it just meant I could wheel the car around. I didn't have to have the front end in. I could keep it or get it a lot cleaner than I could otherwise. And of course there's that below the windshield area all finished off with the other bits of metal welded in, so it turned out well. A bit of trouble because there were so many dents. There's actually 74 of them in there. I thought there were 68. I found a few others. Whenever there's a dent, the surrounding metal apparently tends to wave up, so I've been banging and filling, I've just filled the whole thing in with a skim of filler. This is a 2-pack fine filler. So I'm having a rotten time, and I really wanted to get the car painted by Easter. This way is to go with what an old school beater told me and just use this stuff. So that's what it looks like done. Now we can lay a skim of plastic over it. Just going around looking for imperfections. There's some here. I've just put pencil line where some of them are. That's just an insect. There's one there. This is all looking pretty good. It's just edge primed for now, but the 6-cylinder kickdown brackets are gone, the throttle brackets are gone, all the holes for them. I've got rid of the holes there for the washer bottle. I don't like those washer bottles under there. They're original Ford items, and that will mean that I do away with the sort of pulse type arrangement that they had attached to the wiper motor, and also the plumbing up there looks a bit messy, so I'm not going to put one of those back on. But I've also just edged this. This needs a bit of finishing off. It's straight, but I just have to do a little bit more work up there. It's not quite there yet. Heap of work, but worth it. Blue paint into the boot, and it looks absolutely lovely. I hope the Wimbledon white, this is just a sort of a base coat I've thrown down. Being acrylic, it's sort of a satiny finish. These sorts of areas I'll sort of colour sand and buff them. The same with the shocker towers and, you know, around these jams and that sort of thing. They're not too bad the way they are, but in order to make them look better, they'll have to be buffed. So I got the car painted, turned out really well. I was very happy with it. There's always one or two things you think, oh, I probably could have done that better, but that's what you get when you paint a car in your garage at home. Electroplated stuff from Waters Metro and Bayswater. I've heard a rumour they're going to sell up, which is a real shame because their work is among the best I've seen, and they're the most reasonable. They're absolutely brilliant. And of course, these are the door locks, and you have to take those springs out before you get them plated. The acid they use is a bit too strong, particularly for that little guy I've just picked up that was in the foreground. And yeah, it's like doing an IQ putting those back in. You can see this is a homemade throttle linkage out of an XCXD one. I've lengthened it at the top so I can get it through the firewall in the right spot without cutting another hole. And of course, we're under the car here after we've stripped and deadened the underside, and it really does look really good under there. In fact, in some ways it looks better under there than it does on top. Just fitting it out. I'm putting the insulation in underneath the dash, which was the fiberglass stuff, so you want to put your gloves on before you do that. And then of course we're into wiring and removing bits and pieces of wiring and repairing bits and pieces of wiring. The main one I removed actually was I think it's coming up shortly, is the silicon covered or the rubber covered resistor wire for the coil. I don't like those things at all. Doing a steering wheel repair with a bit of Araldite, a 2-part epoxy adhesive. I have used automotive filler before, but I find it cracks over time, where the Araldite doesn't seem to stick to masking tape, so you can just take it off after and sand it back and it's perfectly paintable. That's the line that sort of transitions from the engine bay to underneath the car. I wanted that to look neat for when I got underneath it, because I've seen it before. It looks mucky on other builds. Not mine though. This is where we just buff it and have a bit of a look, and really happy with how the paint turned out. I put a lot of paint on, but I wanted to give it room for sort of buffing. That's just buffed, it's not polished or anything, and I'm perfectly happy with that. And all told, I think every material came up at being $1,300, so it was good. And so here we're just starting to fit the column and using all those new lovely plated parts, and this is where a build becomes fun. I'm not happy with how this fits. It's sort of sitting proud at the top. It's probably down to this non-genuine dash pad. It's pretty crummy really. Let that dry, I suppose. So back to the wiring. That's the rubber stuff I was telling you about that goes to the coil. It's a resistor wire. Good in a factory application, but I've seen those things melt. If you use different types of coils with different resistances and that sort of stuff, they can be problematic. So heave that out, use a standard one, and a 12-volt coil. That's the wiper motor. I didn't want to get a recode one. That one was fine. I just gave it a paint job and made that little steel plate for where the pulse washer thing was. I just think it looks neater to my mind. And of course, I lucked out and got an XY booster. They're different from XWs, and this didn't have power assisted brakes before. Now it does, and it's got the lovely big XY booster and also the Kelsey Hayes calipers, which you'll see soon. So we really did well with upgrading. And of course, the 351 engine uses that sort of external solenoid with a clapper starter, so I had to put that in, and also the driving light relay I put in a different spot up the front. So for some reason the 351s used the 3/8 fuel line. I ended up putting one in here and making it myself, and it was hellish to bend properly. The car would have been fine with 5/16. I think the XC is all 5/16. And you can see it in place there. They're the springs now. They're Windsor springs, and I should have got Clevo ones because the 351 Windsor is heavier than the 302 one. So it's effectively almost like a 6-cylinder spring I've got in the front of it, which is a pain in the neck. So I'm always a bit gun shy doing this. It scares me a bit. But anyway, putting the idler arm in there, front end all went in beautifully. Although I don't like the spring saddles I've got. They're rubbish. They're terrible quality, and now they're squeaking a couple of years down the track. I think I finished this car 2 years ago. Discs are going on, all new kit, and of course rebuilding the front calipers and getting ready to put those on. This thing bled up first time really easily. It was all really, really good. And there you see them. The original kit for this car, which is wonderful being able to get that stuff. I'd sooner that than sort of some of the modern equivalents, even though in a lot of ways they're better. But you can see there it's all finished. The front end's all together and in, and all looking good. Even the bearing caps I replaced, so I thought it looked nice. And of course it'll make a different sound. Just gotta let the thing warm up a bit. I'm just gonna check those belts again. Get some air in here. Whew. Do something with that bottom pulley. I don't like it. It's got run out. Put the fan on now, and the temperature's stabilised beautifully. So I might shut it down in a minute and drop the oil. Just about to push it back, and I'm having a bit of trouble getting it to go. And it'll start to level out.
Fancy across the road wants it to be now.
Go. That seal and seal nicely. I got these new screws. I didn't need to get these. I thought they were the lens.
Each of this with my cupboard.
With your cupboard?
Yep, my door. The door
Oh,
doesn't fit.
oh, that's right. It's naked, isn't it? Hang on. I'm just gonna.
It's like a pain to get on.
Now, I'm just going to sort of nip them down so I can see where. Let go of it. Marry that up. But these 2 points here aren't too bad. I've got these gaps fairly even, all down here, and these two apexes are sort of in line there. They're lubricated and moving nice and smoothly. We can sort of put it back in the car and don't secure it with its right screws, which I had plated ages ago. That should, oops, pull that out the way. Beautiful. Whoops. So all looking great. The engine bay is all finished there. You can see how nice and lovely it looks. It kind of still looks like that. It's not as new looking, I guess. I probably should have put a few more miles on it though. Just planing the rest of it really. I was never happy with that guard either on the left. It just didn't fit as well as the right one. These are the stainless mouldings that go on the top of the door trim, or the door trim sort of slots into. Bit of a hassle around that Coke bottle shape on the back door, in that if you just push it in, it'll close that gap up. So I'm just running a bone through it. That's a Volvo service tool. It's a great bit of kit, a plastic thing, very rigid plastic, and it opens it up, and of course when you put the door trim in you can sort of iron it down again, which is what I'm doing there, and it works quite well. The right amount of clearance and it's good, but I'm having a bit of trouble with this one. This spring can be a bit tricky to get in. I'm just going to get a long screwdriver and sort of squash it around there. I hate springs. There we go. There we go. 2 new hinges, or 2 reconditioned hinges for 29 bucks. I've never been a fan of the transmission coolers in the radiators themselves, so I always disconnect them or isolate them. This is a PWR cooler. Had one on the Galaxy, got one in this car, and there's one I've got for the XT which I haven't fitted yet. Great insurance, and they're a nice clean looking bit of kit, so I had to have that. Just dealing with the cosmetics of the grill. That was a great grill. There's nothing at all wrong with it, pardon me. Just sort of basically scratched it up and painted where it needed to be repainted, and polished bits and pieces of it as well. But it really did turn out quite well, and of course the grill part there, the plastic bit, I just ended up making my own sort of gunmetal colour, but that did turn out very well as well. So yeah, very happy indeed. So yep, pretty happy. I would have changed how I did the silver across the top, but other than that I was ecstatic with it. So fitted it up to the car, just wanted to see the car have its face again, and I ended up having to shift everything over a few millimetres, just because the bumper didn't look right when I came to put that on later on. But yeah, just sort of sussing out the relationship of where all the lights are, how they sit, how they look, and of course I hung up a sheet in the garage with some measurements and some marks on it, you can see there, just to align it all to make sure that everything's going to sit right and I don't get pulled over by the police when I finally get it on the road. Marbling over my paint job on the roof. Of course, that thing had 74 dents in it. I got rid of most of them, haven't dollied most of them, but some of them I just had to fill over because there was structure behind there, and only very, very shallow ones. Jason Hill helped me with the headlining, but we had trouble with the back one because the rear listing was too far away. It was a bad pattern. So I ended up taking the rear bow out and drilling another hole and twisting it around to make that taut at the back. That was the only way I could do it. But you know, aside from that, it did look very good in the end. I had the transmission looked at by a specialist who was a lovely man. He used to do roadworthies as well, and I asked him to do the selector shaft seal because I know you've got to take the valve body out to do it. It was a pig, and he didn't do it. He must have just forgotten. The poor chap, he's died now, so he might have even been sick at the time. So I ended up having to do the valve, the what do you call it, selector shaft seal, pardon me, on the ground, which was a bit of a pig of a job, but it was doable. It wasn't a big deal. We got it done in the end, and it didn't leak, so that was all good. And of course the old mandatory rear Venetian. They're a real habit of mine. I love the things. I've got them in all the Fords now, and I've even got one in the Sigma. So I had to have one of those. I love the look of those things. I can sort of adjust one bit. I've got the guard sitting right out too, which I can bring in after. These gaps, and I had a huge gap on this side, and not enough gap on that side. And I've literally just undone the guard bolts on both sides, bolt onto here, bolt in the centre there, and just move the whole clip over about 2 millimetres. And it felt like Christmas time, getting to unpack that fuel tank. And it's also good getting rid of big boxes and stuff out of the garage and actually giving it a purpose. And with time's upon us to stick it in the car, which was great. And give them a quick nip up. And they're all good. So the old XW is looking pretty good now, and just marbling at it, I guess. I've still got to put the boot lid on. These were the seats I ended up getting, in the wrong ones because they're ZAZB Fairlane, which are different from XW and XY. And there's a bit of a slideshow later where Jason Hill actually pulled them right down and cut them in half and remodeled them to make them sort of the same as what the XWs and XYs had. Well, there it is. I've just thrown a bit of clear over it, just not too much, just to give it a sort of a nice clean satin finish. Screen just fitted the heater box and connecting all the cables and testing it, which was good. There were no issues with that at all.
It's all working well.
And of course, just pulling these horrible seats apart. Though I got them cheap from Ray Quan in Bayswater, but they were really filthy, those things. So a good deal of those got thrown out, and the rest of it got sandblasted. Just putting a bit of premium in. It's got 5 litres, this will make it 10. Tell you what, I can't wait to get this cracker on the road. Haha. Well, that's the first time this car's run. Or I should say, this is the first time that engine's run since it was on the stand quite a few months ago. And it's noisy for a car that looks like this. You would think a car that had that appearance would be nice and quiet, but it has got that temporary exhaust on. Now, and so back on the seats, and again, just sort of explain this, they're a little bit wider than what the original XWXY ones were. But I ended up pulling them apart, sandblasting them, and then taking them off to be powder coated.
But I have an issue because
they ended up looking really, really good in the end. Of course, here's the bumper, which was all sort of twisted and looking horrible when I got it on the car. That's the original bumper that came with it, and just check that out. It's one of those triple chrome guys. It wasn't cheap. It was $520 at the time. It's probably a lot more now, though. Back to the seats again. There's a sort of little spring damper things. I wouldn't have bothered doing this if I'd known I was going to get them powder coated. I would have left it to them to get done. Doing that. So it's just a matter of going around and trying to make sure that it's all going to fit properly, which it should. It always worries me this guard's just crap and nothing lined up on it, so when I can get this right against the floor and more importantly against the tunnel there. But here so it sort of sits like that, but it does seem awfully, whoops, feeling a bit like an anus because I welded up these holes. And Michael, I got Michael too, because down here the camera's in the way. I'm just going to move the camera. Yeah, this is a bad light. This is a terribly bad light to see it. The carpet looks a terrible colour, but it's really, really nice. So I think we'll leave it at that for now. So I ended up breaking this remote boot release. I bought it for the Galaxy originally and never put it in. So I just sort of repaired it and gave it a bit of a test job, and yeah, there it seems to work. So that was pretty good. And the other thing was those chrome bits off those old seats were that damaged and that horrible. I ended up seriously getting the angle grinder with a flappy disc, getting all the rust off, bogging them or bodyworking them, and just painting them silver. It was only supposed to be a temporary thing though. But anyway, look, I've left it now. It's still in the car now, so it's all good. Up and put those on, and he's absolutely knocked it out of the park. It's really, really nice how he's done it. So we've got to fit those, but you can see the difference here between the XY Fairmont squab frame on the left to mine, which is on the right. The XY frame's taller and tapers in toward the top, and here they are with the foam installed, which again is totally different. So we took measurements and began fabricating the top shells to emulate the XY frame. He also needed to fit side pieces so the backboards had something to attach to. Remember, the early seats didn't have a backboard, they were sewn all the way around. Being an upholsterer by trade, Jason adopted some old school methods in the way he approached his work. This is some underlay stitched to Hessian, the spring protector system, to eliminate the chance of the springs chafing the foam. This was stitched again, this time to the frames. Well protected. So some trimmers foam was added to relevant areas to aid in the shaping of the new vinyl covers. And the covers were then fitted. And don't forget that these aren't great fitting covers. They're made from a pattern and were very cheap. Many of them didn't fit at all and were really worked into place. Here are the cushions. And here's work being undertaken on one of the squabs. Almost there before the rear panels are fitted. And a completed seat propped up for the photo. Jason's car is a beautiful XW Fairmont wagon. Every hanger-on now has been gapped professionally. It's now painted in 2-pack wild violet and will shortly receive its lovely overhauled 252V engine. When reassembling these things, don't forget to run a 5/16 course tap sewing down through these threads here. These were powder coated and they were also a bit rusty when I got them, so there was a bit of muck in there, not too much but enough to cause concern, and we can just sort of bang it together nice and quickly now. And then we can just put it into place. Now these door seals are a cracker. They're about half the price you'd normally pay for door seals from Rare Spares, and I can't remember who made them, but the fit was perfect. So naturally I bought all four and I was wrapped with them. The interior's finished. The new seat belts are in and all that sort of stuff. There's a colour shift on the armrest and the kick trim down there, which is more obvious in this light than in natural light. In natural light you don't even notice that, and of course those little trims on the top of the B-pillars, I still haven't got around to putting them on yet. I'm just going to put it in. I've just got the camera sitting on the seat at the moment, and it's actually quite hard to get it just right because I'm looking at it on a funny angle. I can shut the glove box door on my XW that smells like a new car. Well, that's a case of do as I say, not as I do. You shouldn't really do that, running a car on a jack stand, but there was a couple of reasons why I wanted to. It's up on jack stands, which are locking jack stands, and also on the jack itself. I wanted to see if the auto was shifting. I also wanted to see how the tail shaft was going, because I had a lot of trouble getting uni joints, the right uni joints for it. And so I wanted to make sure it was all settled and central at the same time. So I'm looking for tail shaft vibration. So I'm going to put it down on the ground. It'll be the first time. I think that today's the 23rd of July. It's exactly 2 years and 3 days since this car's moved under its own steam. I got the idle a little bit too high, so I have to adjust that. Look how quiet it is. Stereo, sounds good. It feels nice and talky. I'm really impressed with how it feels. It's lovely. It's very stiff. It's all very new. Particularly now the car's been in the sun, the interior really smells like a new car. It feels beautiful to drive. It feels a lot tighter than my XD, and that's a really, really good car. It's a nice tight car. My head will be in the way. Do you like it?
No.
Hang on, I'll shut the door. Okay, 2 years ago, miss, jump in the car, took you for a drive. We'll go do the same drive again. I find it more comfortable now.
Yeah, I heard them screaming from here.
So, this is it before we pulled it apart. Make sure I don't hit my Commodore. Alright. Oh well, first drive when it's legally on the road. And you should notice, do you remember a couple of years ago when we did this?
Yeah, it's hard to forget.
I said I don't want to hit my Commodore, it was parked there. It drives a bit differently now though. Do you feel that horsepower, miss?
Tough to compete with this car.
Feel that power. A bit noisy. Do you remember when we went around this roundabout down here?
Yep.
Oh,
Ow!
you right?
It needs seatbelts first.
Yeah,
It's still a bit bumpy.
it's all got sort of stiff suspension in the front. And it's a different car to drive. It's much nicer to drive. I want to get out of this estate because there's too many cars around.
I am the best daughter ever. Are we gonna go take pictures, Dad?
I'm going to do something really wanky, but
Everything you do is wanky.
that's why I'm coming down here because this one is down.
Oh, the driveway.
Yeah, right. Got to get one down here too. I feel like a bit of a dick doing this, but what do you do?
You look like a bit of a dick.
Do I? Do I really?
Yeah.
I feel stupid. Maybe after I've been dead for 30 years, you'll kind of get it.
Are you checking your hair in the mirror?
I did. I actually did. No, so I was supposed to get a haircut 4 weeks ago and I didn't get it done. And it looks terrible. I didn't even wash it last night. It was really manky.
Bye bye, train. Pardon?
Feel me reversing down the road. There are a couple of things I haven't mentioned in the past videos about this car, and that's the very reason I always wanted one. To be quite honest, it's going to sound like I'm having a huge midlife crisis, and I tell you what, if it is, I couldn't care less. I've been really enjoying it. You see, the older I get, the faster life seems to pass by. We now appear to live in a very rapid-paced and uncertain world. Although inevitable, our technology-rich times mean that change is a way of feeling far more prevalent now than it ever did before. There just never seems to be enough time to bask in the moment. So on the odd occasion, it's nice to take a couple of steps back from these ultra-fast times and seek refuge in a place where life was completely uncomplicated. One of those places for me was as a kid in the 1970s. So I've taken a trip to Heathmont to get a few photos, and here's its inspiration, parked in precisely the same place 44 years ago and almost to the day. I've just built a tribute car. Not a full replica by any means, just a representation of a chapter in my life and the lovely memories it reignites. Way back in September 1971, my father bought this new XY Fairmont at a cost of $3,700 from Allen Coffey Ford in Ringwood. After 8 years had passed, it had clocked a little over 80,000 miles when he traded it on another new car, a Nutmeg V8 XD Falcon. That event took place on the 10th of May 1979. When I decided to purchase this car, I had the intention of leaving it as a 6-cylinder Falcon 500 and making some pocket money when it came time to sell it. But all that changed when I jumped in the car to drive it home. I had an epiphany. From my first tactile encounter with this car on the 9th of July 2013, I had the look you see now and the specifications completely decided and haven't deviated from it since. This was to be a tribute car I intended to enjoy, and I have, irrefutably, more than any other car I've restored or recommissioned in the past. This XW is a mishmash of a lot of things I like about Fords, particularly the XW and XY Falcon range. I love the GT 351s and they are relevant to me. I used to watch Bathurst as a kid and my brother had a GT in the early 80s. We even had a genuine Phase 2 parked in the driveway for a very short while. But it sort of belonged to someone else. Great memories. But you know what? Even though I'd love one, well, they're a little out of my reach. Anyway, the car I was to build would be far more modest. When I look back and consider the old XY, it represented the whole family package. The holidays, going to live in Yarrawonga, the school run, that kind of thing, the family stuff. So with this car I wanted something subtly different and yet something that looks like it could have been factory article. This car has a little bit of Ford Mustang in it. The colour of choice, Wimbledon white, is a 1960s Mustang colour. I just didn't like the correct XW whites enough, despite originally intending to paint it polar white. The engine came from my brother's Mustang and the transmissions from a Mustang as well. I also like the Americanised engine bay, although not the satin black like they paint them. Little odds and ends here and there that separate it from the bulk of other XWs we see. Then there are the XY Fairmont influences, the entire interior, from the headlining and upholstery to the change of saddle painted metalwork. The only exterior reference to the XY are the wheel covers, but they're originally derivatives from the Mustang anyway. End of the day though, it's just a Falcon. This car owes me, as well as my wife and children, about $27,500 and I think 1,300 hours of labour. If I were to pay someone to restore this car, it'd look a lot better, but it just wasn't a possibility to do it that way. When it's all said and done though, who cares? The 1st of November this year, 2015, will be Dad's 90th birthday, and on a more sombre note, the 24th of November marks 30 years since we lost him. Certainly not a celebration of his death, but another reason to remember him. So at that end, I'm going to dedicate this car, to my father Ethel Anderson and the fond memories I have of another old family car. See you later.